So glad to finally have Therapy Jeff himself on the podcast.
You're like beaming. Your smile so big.
I know. I've been a mega fan for a while. Actually, it's funny. I think I got served up your stuff on TikTok just randomly once. And I was like, who is this magnificent human? And I just immediately started stalking you on Instagram and then TikTok and all the things. But yeah, I'm just so glad that you came on, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really happy to connect with you. I've been watching all your stuff for so long, so I'm glad that we finally get to have a talk.
I love the social media landscape, how it's kind of brought people together. So we normally start by asking all of our guests, look, we're therapists. We're interested in the background, right? Why, how are you who you are, right? Like, what's the story? Tell us how you became to be Therapy Jeff.
Oh God, I feel like there's a lot of how did I become? God, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out, like, should I tell you like the real story or like
yes,
sort of, like,
yes.
a fun podcast?
No, I don't want a fucking podcast story.
We don't. Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Well, it goes back to my mother is a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
She's a marriage and family therapist. So, were your parents therapists either?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Oh God, no.
Polar opposite. Where did you grow up, Jeff?
I grew up in Santa Monica, California.
Oh, okay, so you are an LA guy. I said that. I was like, I think he must be from California because I saw where you went to school, and then I was like, oh, I think we've got some LA blood in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I went to Santa Barbara City College and San Diego State, then USC for my grad degree.
okay.
And my mom's a therapist, but I felt really disconnected from her growing up. There was just sort of like, she was either like trying to navigate her dramatic and traumatic relationships with like the men in her life, or she was like sort of like catering to my big sister, who was like very good at asking for attention in like very loud and obvious ways. And I sort of grew up being a little bit more reserved and quiet and sort of like behind the scenes. So I never really felt super connected with my mom. And then in college, I got this brilliant idea that like, I'm going to become a therapist in order to like really kind of like step into the shoes of what my mother does. And we'll be able to like talk about therapy. And won't that be nice and wonderful? And it did the opposite, unfortunately.
Interesting.
which was really upsetting because I like learned about therapy, and my like therapy style or like my values around therapy or the way that I like perform as a therapist is just opposite of hers. Like it turned out like, oh, we didn't connect because maybe we were just sort of like different people. And becoming the therapist that I became, and she's, the therapist that she is, just sort of like was like shining a light on like the differences between us, which was really upsetting for me and for her. So it was this really weird experience of like, I'm going to do this thing to like be more connected with my mom. And also like, I didn't even want to become a therapist. Like this was not the plan. The plan was to become like a 3D animator. Like I was obsessed with like 3D animation. I wanted to work for Pixar. Like that was the plan.
I get that vibe.
Yeah. So I just like wanted to be in tech.
Yeah.
And I pivoted into becoming a therapist. But like, luckily, I really enjoyed it. Like, I love being a therapist and figuring out what my style was and who my clients were. I first started out working with like children and teenagers, and also like I was going to be a preschool teacher for a second. So I learned about like child development in San Diego, and I taught parenting classes after I like got my graduate degree, and I worked in middle schools. But then I got really tired. I got like really triggered. I had a lot of like countertransference with the parents that I was working with, which makes sense because I have a lot of like shit with my parents. So I was really having a hard time like holding empathy for all the parents, being like, this is your fault. Like, I'm here with these kids and these kids are rad. Like, we need to work on your shit.
Yep.
So I stopped working with parents and families and children because I was just like, I was getting a lot of supervision around it. And I was just like, I need to take a break from it. So instead I was just going to like work with people that are like in my age range. And I had also recently moved to Portland, Oregon. And I was just like, all right, I'm seeing like young adults. I'm a young adult. And all these young adults were just sort of like coming in with their like relationship issues or like existential crisis. A lot of them were feeling really anxious in relationships. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to like work on like anxious attachment styles or like feelings of codependency or whatever. And I just kept on doing that. And I never went back to working with families or kids. And now I work with like couples, people in relationship, or people that are like struggling in their relationships. So I did that, and then I started like renting office space to like part-time office space to therapists in Portland. That turned into a big hit. So I started opening up different like office spaces, and then I created a website for all those office spaces, which is sort of like a local therapist directory. And then that turned into a really big deal in Portland, and I was like running the like biggest therapist directory here in Portland. And then I was like, okay, well, I'll make a national therapist directory, and I created therapyden.com, which is just like a huge national therapist directory. And then the pandemic eventually hit, and I kind of like stopped doing, like not stopped, but like pulled back on a lot of things I was doing and just focused on clients. I also decided to watch all 40 seasons of Survivor during the pandemic. Have you gone on that journey?
I have not.
No, I've seen like bits and pieces of it. I am so not good with reality TV. I am like, the second something gets uncomfortable or awkward, I'm like, okay, I have to change this. I'm like a fast forward through the awkward scenes kind of person. I should really talk to my therapist about that.
You might want to, so that you can watch Survivor, because
Noted.
it is amazing. It is the best reality show, and I've watched many reality shows. I love Survivor.
My esthetician, by the way, was on one of the seasons of Survivor, funny enough, and she's like hot and like from LA, and I'm like, wait a second, you were on what? Random side note.
Yeah, I love it. I've met some Survivor cast members because of my like therapy chat accounts, and this is worth it. This is exactly why I'm.
Makes it all worth it.
Yeah. So then I started watching Survivor. When I got through all 40 seasons of Survivor, I had nothing else to do. But by then, I was also like fully addicted to TikTok.
Yes.
And
I think that's what happened during the pandemic for most of us.
Yeah, we all suffered that.
Yep.
And then, but while I was watching, I was like, I get this. Like, I can do this. Like, I know the formula. I see why like certain videos are going viral, and therapy is trending. Right. So it's just like, and I also have like a bunch of one-liners. Like as therapists, we like say the same thing sometimes over and over to our clients, and we know it's so good because it hits and they feel it in their heart. And, you know, there's this whole thing that happens. So it's like, I'm just going to like say my one-liners, see if that works. It took like 4 videos to go viral, and the rest is history. And now I'm like unhealthily addicted to making content and getting those likes, and I'm fine with it. I've accepted that.
Your last one, I shared it with today. The last one where you said what couples therapy is like really about, and you're like, it's all about getting them to give you that look where like they agree with you. And I was dying, and I said to them, I was like, see, this is why I love Jeff, because he makes this content that we all talk about. Like this is the real that therapists talk about, but you put it out there.
Yeah, I'll put it out there. And that's what like resonates with a lot of people. I try to make like complicated sort of stuff like more concise and digestible and easy to understand. So it's been a lot of fun, and TikTok is like, you know, blown up, and then I like got on Instagram soon after. And I think it was Instagram where I've like been able to like develop a really good community with like fellow therapy creators. That's been really fun.
Beautiful. I kind of wanted to circle back to what you were saying, that you came to understand about yourself and your style of working versus your mother's style, and what the difference was that you came to see as you did this work. Yeah,
I think, I mean, I kind of wish that she was on. I don't really, actually, but like she deserves to be able to like be in this conversation.
Right.
But she's not here, so she can find another podcast.
We can have her on next week.
If you like to rebut.
Right. She's just sort of like classic CBT, which can be like super useful, especially for the clients that she attracts. So she's like real CBT narrative sort of style. And I got like, at the beginning, I was like really into Jung and like the collective sort of unconscious. But then I like dropped into like more just sort of like lots of like depth work and being like really vulnerable in the room. So that's kind of like the difference, is that like
it's a big difference, by the way.
Yeah.
Because you know we're both depth oriented psychotherapists. Like that's we went to Pacifica, so we're like we live and breathe it. And so I always say too, it's like CBT is very important, right? And we're trained in a lot of techniques for specific reasons, but there's only so many band-aids that we can put on bullet holes before we have to actually heal the bullet hole, right? Yeah, that makes sense.
And I'm also just sort of like dropping into the session in a really vulnerable way where we're like talking about the relationship between me and the client, and so it's just like feels more emotional or vulnerable. I think my mom is a really good therapist, especially for like the clients that she attracts. But it's funny because like I was really just trying to become a therapist so I can like be more emotionally vulnerably connected with her. And then I was like, oh, like she just doesn't create that space. And she's also one of those parents that maybe like has like said I love you 5 times in my life or something. She's just like not a very affectionate person. So it's just like me craving this and then really kind of coming to terms with like that is not comfortable for her. Like that is not what she's able to give. Luckily I like had lots of, I don't know, was it healthy transference or not, with like lots of like supervisors that I've had that are like amazing therapists, and also my own therapists to kind of like start healing this sort of like wounded child that's inside of me, and like trying to figure out how to like accept where my mom is at, and her limitations and how she loves me.
Well, I want to go there a little bit, only because this is something Danae and I will kind of regularly talk about. We have complicated relationships with our own mothers. And we talk about it as much as we can in a social landscape. Right. But we have a lot of clients and a lot of listeners that will come to us and say, I really resonate with that. And recently I said to Danae, there was this instance, I suppose, where I caught myself kind of almost like out of body telling my mom something. Like she had asked me a question about something in detail. And I was like, oh, like she's interested. And so I caught myself like almost oversharing, because I was like so like, oh, excited. Like I want this approval. I want this. And it was like I was watching myself out of my body. Right. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like pump the brakes, because I saw her kind of glaze over. It was too much. And I just found it so fascinating, because I work with so many clients, especially I think, at least in my experience, women who are just so hungry for that mother relationship. But I mean, men too, I just maybe don't talk about it as often. And I'm wondering, I guess, as you've started healing this, if you could share, what are some of the, I don't want to say it's a technique because it's not that simple, right? But when you find yourself in that situation where you are really craving that, because it's such a visceral experience for so many of us, I guess, what do you do? Like, what do you do with that? How do you soothe,
I cry. Like in those moments, I know exactly what you're talking about, where I'm just like, oh my God, here's a glimpse, or not even, there was like something that I went through a few months ago where I had this like really like deep, like authentic reaction where I was going through like a really difficult time. I was really struggling with something that I was experiencing, and I was just like, I just want my mom. I just want my mom to like comfort me and be there for me. And she can't. She does not have the ability to like show up in a really emotionally authentic way and hold the space that I like so badly want her to hold for that specific thing that I was going through. And then like a million other things that I've gone through in my childhood. So there's a lot of tears that come through. I talk to my therapist. I talk to my like other therapist friends about it. But then I have to kind of like just get in touch with the grief of like, my mom is not going to be the mom that I need her to be. And that really sucks. And I really hate that. And it makes me really angry. And then I get stuck in the anger, and that anger lasts hours, days, weeks. I don't know. Like, it's just sort of like, it just kind of like takes over, and I'm like flooded by it. So I try to eventually get to the point where I'm like, my mom did the best that she could do, and I deserve better. But when I get to like my mom did the best that she could do, I get stuck, because I'm just like, no, she didn't. No, she didn't, actually. And if I was her, then I would have done even better. And I don't have any kids because I know that I don't want to be a parent or something. I just like kind of like go into these. So
There's like an adolescence in that, right? Like I say that about me. I find myself, I always say it's like the 15-year-old version of myself where I cross my arms and I'm like, well, because she's the mom right. And it's so funny how that inner adolescence like comes out when you're in that state.
And that inner adolescence is like the thing that got me to survive my childhood and getting through the lack of connection that I was feeling with my mom and my dad. But so like the adolescent is like such a protective, like comfy, familiar place for me to be. And it gives me power. It gives me like strength, and it makes me, I feel so right being in there. But it also like disconnects me even more with my mom because that is I'm not able to be loved or receive love when I'm in that space. And I don't even care, sort of thing. So I'm still working through it. I think I'm going to be working through it the rest of my life. I don't know if I'm ever going to find some sort of like healing place on the other side, or if that's even available to me.
Yeah, I think what you're saying just is so resonant, Jeff. And I think there's something in what happens to our inner adolescent or even our inner child when we continuously go to that parent that doesn't have that capacity or doesn't have, has limitations. And as much as we long for them to be able to meet us there, we'll never be able to. Like I always say, it's sort of like going to the hardware store, attempting to get peanut butter. It doesn't live there. You can't get
it's the best visual ever.
But as long as we're doing that, we're sort of in this disempowering state and abandoning our inner child as well, because it's sort of like that reinforcing of that pain point every time we go to that hardware store, and it's like, no, can't give you that peanut butter that you were looking for. And so how do I do some of that, as you just spoke to? Yeah, you deserve that 100%. That was what you deserved. And unfortunately, the hand that many of us were dealt was that we didn't have a parent with the capacity to offer us that, right?
Exactly. And I've had many conversations with her about this. And she just, the shame that she gets hijacked by, like the parental shame, I have no idea what that feels like, but that looks like the worst shame, or like a top 3 worst shame is like parental shame, where she cannot talk. She cannot access, and she gets really angry, and she
defensiveness.
Gets really she's just super defensive, and then we get into a whole thing about it. So I get hijacked, she gets hijacked, and we have a really difficult time navigating this. And because of our issues that we have not been able to we've been trying to resolve them for 20 years. Like the whole time I've been a therapist. We've taken a break from talking and trying to resolve it. So we haven't talked for 8 or 9 months. And interestingly, that's when all of my social media stuff, Therapy Jeff, started to just go viral. And I know through other people in the family that she just does not like Therapy Jeff. She is not a fan. Can you believe it?
We're like, what?
I know, right?
But you know what though? I feel that. I can feel that. I don't know her, but I can sense that, there's something in that. I don't know if that's confronting for her, if it's a mirror that she doesn't want to look in, right? The difference in who you are and how you present yourself is on full display. I mean, there's so many components to it that I'm sure that part of her is just so activated by it.
So activated. And she watches every single thing I do.
Not surprising either.
Yeah, which makes sense. And part of the problem,
mine doesn't. Which is funny. Neither does yours today.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't think that she should watch. I think it's incredibly triggering for her.
Right.
And every now and then I'll talk about my family, and sometimes I'll talk about her specifically. I'm not trash talking her. I'm just talking about my relationship with my mother is, and I'll kind of give little hints about it. And she doesn't like my version of the story, it's and she, again, she's defended, but she's kind of she's told me even before we stopped talking for a while, she's I don't want you to ever talk about our relationship publicly. And what I hear when she the message that she's sending is I don't want you to ever tell your truth. I don't want you to ever tell anybody what your experience is. That's not okay. So I eventually was just no, I'm going to say, I'm going to talk about what my experience is. And if she likes it or doesn't like it, then that's something that she can process on her own.
What did Anne Lamott say? If people wanted you to tell a better version of the story, they should have behaved better. I think it's really interesting hearing you say that in a lot of ways you came fully into your power in a public way when you sort of, put a boundary up in terms of your relationship for a while. Because I think that happens so often. There's a little bit of like, what would mom say about this, or what are, even if it like, I don't know, people in my community going to think about this. But when we sort of say at some point, I don't care anymore, I'm going to be myself and let myself be seen. Yeah, I think that there can be a severing of those relationships, at least for a while sometimes, but sometimes that's necessary to really step into a capital S self, right?
Yeah, exactly. But it's brought the Therapy Jeff videos is fun, and all the difference I'm making, or the attention I'm getting, or like the people like telling me that they're like so positively affected and everything. Like, I love that. But it's also created an even bigger wedge between me and my whole family, actually. So like, most of the people in my family are not fans. And it's that sort of like when somebody in the family is just like, here's my truth, or here's my version, or here's what happened, that doesn't agree with like the family narrative that everybody has written besides you. And it's like, my sister is a actor and comedian, and she wrote like a one-woman show about her childhood, our childhood, but her version of our childhood. And that was like stamped and sanctioned by my mother. Like, my mother enjoys that version of our family. And so I have like a different version, which is not enjoyable for them. So yeah, it's been difficult.
But I think this is also what so many people experience when they start to break out of that whole, to be honest, kind of toxic narrative that we have around like, don't air the dirty laundry. Don't let people see the skeletons in your closet. We don't tell anybody about our business, and I will say, generationally, I've seen that so much with like my grandmother and my mom's generation in particular, right? This idea of like, we got to keep a face, with it matters what people think about us. And one of the things that I've started to see, at least like Gen X, millennial, these generations, is like, no, fuck that. Because our mental health is suffering. Like, this is not working for any of us, right? To pretend that we're something we're not, or pretend that we're something we're not something we were, or whatever. And so I appreciate that, because I think you're also giving people permission to share their truth. You're giving people permission to be like, no, this is my story, and I'm going to tell people.
Yeah. And there's also like, if you have big followings on social media, there's going to be a certain amount of people that do not like you.
Oh, right? Yeah.
And
especially on TikTok, by the way. TikTok is ruthless. What is up with that?
I don't know. It's definitely TikTok where I like. Instagram feels like a much more warm and fuzzy place to me.
Agreed.
I have to like make sure, if I'm in a bad mood and I'm having a hard day, there's a part of me that's just like, I'm going to go see about all these people that hate me. I'm going to like go into that comment section, and it feels like self-harm. Like, I'm feeling bad, so I'm going to harm myself even more by looking at all these. And so I have to make sure I don't do that. But one of the things that people don't like about me, which I find like so interesting, is that like there's these videos out there that are just like, we don't like Therapy Jeff. And it's kind of like he's like, it's not that he's toxically positive, but he's more of like a toxic validator. Like, he's just like validating everybody's feelings and emotions. And you know what? Not everybody should have their feelings and emotions validated. And so it's like, I need to print that on a shirt, toxic validator. Like,
I know, I was like, what's that even mean?
I don't know what that means, but I love it. Like, I'll take it.
Toxic validator.
Which
That's
is funny,
some bullshit.
That is some bullshit. But it's like, as therapists, when we're like talking to our clients, we're doing a lot of validation so that they can like feel seen and understood and heard and all this stuff. Like, they didn't get that from their family or their parents or something. I understand. But there's also like, I do challenge my clients, and I'm like trying to get them to grow. And like, what are you going to take responsibility for? Like, yeah, it's your fault that your parents did this, but now it's your responsibility to like do something about it, or not pass it down to your kids or whatever. But like, I can't like put all that nuance into like 60-second videos or something. So they're going to like pick out all these things and think I'm a toxic validator.
Toxic validator.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk about how that works when you're working with couples, because you were saying that you work with anxious attachment styles and codependency. And so how does that sort of play out when you're navigating those rough waters of couples therapy?
It's funny because did we talk about it right before we hit record? The recent video where I'm like, it's a joke, but it's also kind of not a joke, where like those couples come in and they like tell their sides of the story, and they like really want you to choose their side, and they'll feel so validated
when you do.
Like, you're right, yeah.
And let's be real for everybody listening. In our heads, we are choosing sides.
Yes,
I'm not.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Don't lie.
No, you know me. I'm like, own your 100%. Both of you kids, go to your corners. I don't know.
I still think it happens. I still think it happens in the beginning. We're human. Like, there's no way that you don't, even as a human, sit there and be like, okay, this is kind of bullshit, you know? And then you go back to your place of like, let's hold the tension of the opposites. Both can be true.
Totally.
I just love that you tell them, or that they can tell by your face, that you're on one person's side. At least try to have a poker face about my
Do
side.
you though? Do you have a poker
I
face?
tried. No, Vanessa's like,
No,
you have
she
no
does
poker
not.
face. You think you do.
But I'll go ahead and I'll say the cliche bullshit that you two say, which is like, I'm not taking anyone's side. I'm taking the side of the relationship, and I want to just fucking barf all over myself.
Yeah.
But like,
Dying.
but I can, like, I am in a relationship advocate. Like, I'm here to like heal this relationship with both of you. So we'll go ahead and do this. But it's like, it's a fun challenge and skill to like validate both of their experiences, and be like, you know, there's no room for objective reality in this conversation. You know, we're just looking at like the subjective truths that you're talking about. And so it's always a really big challenge to be like, I don't fucking care about the quote unquote facts or your objective reality. Like, we're just talking about like, how can you be there for the other person? And so it's kind of like an emotionally focused couples counseling sort of thing. But that takes a long time to like validate them, get them to validate each other, try to like stop being right. It's also like, do you want to be right or do you want to be connected? Also, I want to barf all over myself every time I fucking say that. But it's so good, and I have to say it all the time. You know what I mean? So
I find that my practice of validating couples usually comes in when I tell them both they're both being ridiculous. That's usually my validation. Y'all are both fucking crazy, and let me tell you why. And so I don't really like seeing couples that often anymore, because I find that I am wildly activated by at least couples that are in high conflict. This is like a new revelation of mine this last year. Danae loves it. Usually I actually end up having them go to Danae after I hit my breaking point.
For high conflict couples, I'm like, yes, I love it.
Yeah. And I use it as fodder for my own therapy. I'm like, I love it, but also this is like, I want to crawl under my desk and cry after every one of these sessions. So I'm like, ooh, fascinating. More grist for my personal mill, you know?
Well, I'm curious to hear more about your work with the anxious attachment style, and here's why.
I was gonna say, get to it today, because you're beating around a bush here. I don't know what bush it is, but I want to know.
Beating around a bush. Well, no, but I think Vanessa and I both tend to run a little bit more avoidant, and we have this premise that, you know, the world, especially of psychology, tends to vilify the avoidant a little bit more than the anxious.
And they should.
Hey, and I saw that video. Are they an avoidant or are they an asshole? And I was like, you know what?
I was like, oh snap!
I was like, here's the thing. I'm actually not going to take offense to this, because I'm going to agree with a lot of these.
No, okay. Just for the record, I am joking, and avoidants are like lovely people, and that video is good too, because like an avoidant can be like really want to be in a relationship and do all the things. They're just getting flooded, whatever, and then they kind of like need their space. No big deal. An asshole is something that's totally different. So just because you're an avoidant, that doesn't make you an asshole. Although you might be an avoidant and an asshole.
Like an asshole. But...
You might also be an anxious and an asshole. I'm just gonna say it.
No, actually, it's not possible. I'm an anxious.
No, not possible.
Just beautiful, lovely people.
Lovely.
That just emotionally connect. Yeah.
Always.
At all times. Says the avoidant.
We love love. What's wrong with that? Sorry. Okay, but what was your question? I interrupted you, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, I guess here's the thing. And as a couples therapist, you understand, I am quite often like, we come into relationships at a very adversarial space a lot of times. Like it's exactly what you just said. Like we're fighting to be right. And I get to the point where I'm like, was there ever a point that you guys liked each other? Because there's a lot of like venom in the room. And I guess I wonder what you think as you work with couples, like what is the point of partnership at this point to you? Meaning, like, what are we here for to do with one another? Because I think sometimes we're getting it wrong. I think that we have been taught our partner is responsible for doing our reparenting work, right? And most of the relational models, from my perspective, sort of reinforce that.
Agreed.
And what I find ends up happening is there's not a whole lot of eros and erotic longing for my parent that I am trying to get to reparent me through our relationship the whole time. So how do we have both? How do we have, I'm safe with you, there's security, but also you're not my parent, and I still want to
fuck you.
An erotic
Just
charge,
say it.
I would say, but that's Vanessa.
Listen, I say all the time, like, I can mother you or I can want to have sex with you. Like, I can't do both. So you choose.
One.
Pick one.
So what do you think, Jeff? Like, I'm curious to hear.
Oh my God.
What is the solution, Jeff? Because I don't know.
I just looked at it and goes, what is the purpose of relationship?
I know.
I know. He's like, whoa, somebody's having a way bigger existential crisis.
It's like, yeah, you're definitely an avoidant. That's coming through loud and clear, and I love that for you.
I'm dying. Vanessa's not kidding. You are amazing.
It's, you know what? I'm going to talk, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to like answer your question. Let's just see where this goes. But I think that you're right, that like most of like the stuff, like the literature or theories or psychological bullshit that's out there kind of like encourages folks to kind of like lean on their partner a lot. And get like a lot or all of their or most of their like emotional needs met, or if they're feeling like they need reassurance or validation and they're feeling insecure, like how do you express that to your partner in order to like get that, you know, feeling of safety or whatever you need from your partner? And a lot of my videos, like Therapy Jeff videos, are talking about that, like how to connect with your. But when I make videos about like how to self-soothe, how to like not rely on your partner, how to like take care of your own shit, how to make it so that like you're not trying to heal all your childhood wounds through your relationship, I get a bunch of fucking critical feedback about it.
Oh yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so where it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like, you know, what a lot of times, you know, and I'm like a white guy with all the privileges, right? And so it's easy to be like, okay, this sounds like toxic individualism. Or it sounds like it's kind of, you're kind of like this sort of like white supremacy, pull yourself up in the bootstrap, like capitalism, like don't rely on anybody sort of thing. And also like this Hollywood thing of like, we think that like the person that doesn't have to rely on anybody is like the perfect healthy person, or like the person who just like goes and takes that trip by themselves is like, that's such a romantic, nice thing to do. You don't need any of that. Like the person who can just like be on their own. There's something like really, I think a lot of people think that that's health, not relying on people. So there's like, it's interesting because I feel like there's these two camps that are on like both sides of the spectrum and they get into like arguments together. So it depends like which way I'm leaning, but I'm typically leaning in the direction of like, if you're feeling like you're needy or you need to be soothed or you want to like work through emotional childhood wounds, go ahead and see if you can do that with your partner. If you can't, then go to your therapist. Talk to anyone else in your community, do some fucking meditation or journaling or reading books or something. But also like try to find a partner that's like up to do that. You know, like if you're like coupling up with somebody who's like on the opposite end of your attachment style, like this can be a healing relationship, fine, but there's probably going to have to be like a lot of compromise that's like accepted, and you're not going to get all of those needs met. When it comes to like, I want to fuck you, like I want to feel like that like sexual charge, like a lot of that is sort of like the will we won't we, the like I'm kind of like, you know, I'm not able to connect with you all the time, like there's just sort of like the you feel kind of distant, and then when we have sex, that's when we can feel like really connected and really hot and really sexy. Like I get that there sometimes like if there's like tension in the relationship, that's like a really big turn on. And when we feel like really securely attached, like I don't feel like hopping in bed with you. And so that's when you have to kind of like create the novelty. just like be more adventurous, like kind of push your boundaries a little bit when it comes to like sexy things, or deliberately try to kind of like continue to flirt and turn each other on and do all that stuff. And it might not come from like a really natural or like organic place, but it's coming from a place of just like, well, I value a sexual, like a hot, sexy connection in my relationship. So I'm just going to kind of like deliberately try to create that energy, even though I feel really safe and secure and it's not kind of like coming out of me. You know what I mean?
I have to say really quick, Danae, because I know you've got something you're going to jump in on too. What I will say as like the woman and, you know, heteronormatively speaking, when I feel safe, I feel the most turned on. But safety, even as an avoidant, but safety to me is not suffocating. Safety to me is not like a parentified feeling. Safety to me is in my partner feeling very present and grounded and attuned and creating kind of safety, like a container of safety, right? And so when I feel that kind of safety, I actually do want to have sex with my partner. And I feel like there's maybe in our culture a disconnect between what safety actually means in a romantic relationship. And I would say the same thing from the woman, again, just talking, you know, speaking heteronormatively, like woman to man, like we attempt to create safety by mothering, which obviously does the opposite to their sex drive. So, I don't know. That's just what came up for me as I was like, it's funny you say that because I feel the most sexually charged when I feel the safest.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think it is tricky for some folks to be like, okay, I feel like exactly like you're saying, like I'll feel safe if you mother me.
Yeah.
Like mothering creates safety.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not hot or sexy.
No, it feels gross.
So it feels gross. And it's okay if like your childhood wounds are coming up in relationship, as long as you're like remembering that like, you can now like try to heal those wounds maybe in relationship if your partner like doesn't react like your mother or father or like your caregiver or something. Like they are your peer and they're not like the people that like created this trauma in the first place. So how can you have a corrective experience with them?
I love that. Yeah, because I think there's something in what creates the safety I hear you speaking to, V, is a little bit of this person actually sees me. But if I am using this person to sort of soothe my anxious attachment wound, I'm not actually seeing them. I'm just sort of using them to try to get the thing that I didn't get from that parental figure. But that's not actually about them. That's about me, right? So if I bring the focus back to what is my partner bringing to the surface for me to look at, can I, yes, share it with them, but not make them responsible for it. That's still my responsibility and maybe my therapist and maybe my community and all of the other tools in our toolkit. But then I'm actually able to see that person and be present with them, which hopefully will bring that erotic charge back in, right?
Right, exactly. And there's so many times when like in my relationship and couples sessions, like there's one person that's like asking for reassurance. The other person is providing that reassurance, and the one who wants the reassurance is just like, nope, this isn't it. You're not giving enough of it. I'm just like, if you're gonna ask for reassurance, you have to fucking accept the goddamn reassurance. And
make a t-shirt of that, please.
Speak on it. Listen.
And if it's not enough, then we need to like have your partner leave and have your mom come in, like, because that's what's going on here, right? And so sometimes if I'm even like, sometimes I'm just like a little challenging, a little like frustrated in a professional way. And I'm just like, accept this reassurance. Look what they're doing. This is amazing. And you're like, actually like you want like the unconditional love that your mom or dad never gave you, that they probably never would have been able to fucking give you in the first place.
Anyway. Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree. I think we agree.
I agree.
I just, we need to clarify because some of the videos, sometimes I feel like you're coming for the avoidance. I'm kidding.
You know who I'm coming for? Actually, I'm coming for the secure folks that
those fuckers.
Who are these unicorns? Are they like, where are they?
I'm not gonna call them a unicorn. They're like Jesse. They're boring.
Yeah, nobody's making a TV show about you or a movie based on you. You're like offering nothing to us. There's no drama there.
There's no fodder. There's no drama. We can't work with this.
No.
I feel like more avoidance need to date avoidance and more anxious attachments need to. I'm just curious what happens because somehow we always find each other and then just create. I guess we need friction. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I dated an avoidant and it was great because we were long distance like half the relationship. But then once I actually started doing the work and going to therapy and being like, oh, I actually think I want a deeper connection. It was like, whoa. No, this is not what we do. We don't do deeper connection. And then I was like, oh man. All right. Well, guess I got to go find an anxious now.
I typically date anxious people. The problem is that there's like so much over processing that can happen. Where it's just like, even for me, it's fucking exhausting. I can't do it anymore.
I mean, my partner's a therapist, so it's a lot.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, can we just stop talking? I'm so sick of talking.
I agree. Yeah.
I love it.
So, okay, I'm looking at the time. We have a lightning round of questions, but I also really want to talk about this one thing really quick before we go to it. Okay. So we're going to try to make this very condensed. So one of the things I was thinking about before you got on was, well, there's two things I want to cover. I'm going to try to get to the one. This kind of landscape, this social media landscape, because we were kind of talking about it a little bit beforehand of therapy has become accessible to everyone, right? But we even talked about it a little bit on TikTok. It's a different vibe. The people like come for you in a way that is very different than on Instagram. And by the way, I am hella feisty in my comments on TikTok because I'm like, oh, you're going to come for me? I'll fucking come back. Therapist or not, right? Because I'm like, you're not my community. Clearly, you're here to just stoke a fire. That's it, right? Which feels very different than Instagram. So I don't know. I mean, I don't really know what the real question is, other than just getting your thoughts on this landscape we've created with technology, apps, social media, allowing people to have more access, but also it feels a little dangerous sometimes. I don't know that it's actually as helpful or as healing as maybe the intention was.
I agree. I don't know. And we all say like TikTok isn't therapy or Instagram isn't therapy. Like we're all very clear about that. But like the content that we create is therapeutic. Like people do get a lot out of it. However, it's lacking a ton of nuance and it's not specific to that person. And they might kind of like, I especially don't like the sort of like the videos of like diagnosing people like you have ADHD or you have narcissism or whatever. It's just like, like that is like, I have to have many personal conversations with my clients before I get to a diagnosis, so, and then sometimes they like wear it as a badge or they act it out and it's not, I don't know, there's that's a whole thing. But I do like how therapy does feel more accessible. I want to believe that like the people that are viewing my content are critical thinkers and that they'll take what applies to them and they'll swipe away from things that don't apply to them. And I think a lot of them do that, but not everybody does that. So there might be like inadvertent harm or misunderstanding because of the content that I'm putting out there. But I think that there's like such a net positive that it's okay. Then there's like the accessibility stuff with like the therapy apps like Talkspace or Cerebral and stuff. And it's like, it's interesting because they like Silicon Valley, like they figured out how to make money off of mental health. And they're just like, okay, now we're going to like make apps in order to like get more money. Like the investors are investing in us and we have to like hit this bottom line and be profitable. And they created all these campaigns to destigmatize therapy. So like finally, like the like billions of dollars were put into this marketing all over the place to destigmatize therapy. And it worked in a lot of ways. It's made a huge impact. So like, that's amazing. I love that. But it's because of capitalism. But, it's because of like, we're going to destigmatize therapy only because we have figured out how to make money from it. And then, oh, by the way, we actually haven't figured out how to make money because like none of those apps have ever been profitable ever. Like you think maybe like they're collecting like a bunch of clients and people are paying the fees, but like they're having a hard time attracting therapists because therapists don't like to work for those apps. They don't get paid very well, or they get paid too hard, or there's like some funky word count they can't go over, or there's like really weird shit, or there's like privacy policies that they don't agree with, and yada yada. So like there's actually like a lot of problematic things about these therapy apps that are out there now, and they're like totally missing the mark. And I predict that they're all just going to like go bankrupt, and like all the investors are going to lose all the money that they've invested. But it's probably like a good test to see like how to do it. This is how not to do it. And there's probably is a better way to do it, but we haven't figured out how to do that. Like how to pay the therapists enough, or like a living wage at least, and then how to like control quality of care, because like there's a lot of like that's really lacking. How to make it so that like you don't have to sell the like mental health data that you're collecting to third party advertisers to make extra money, because you can't make enough money by just providing services. There's so much that goes into it, although, you know, like it is very accessible, and that's really great. But there's, I have a lot of feelings about it. How do you all feel about it?
It's so complicated, you know, because I feel like you really spoke to something I feel similarly about. I feel torn a lot of times with some of the social media, you know, personal development and therapy spaces, because what I find ends up happening with clients a lot is there's just like a lot of pathologizing myself, and like this person said this and I think I have this, and I'm like constantly I'm broken, and I just need to always be in the space of attempting to fix. And I don't love that aspect, but I do think, to your point, there's been a lot of normalization of just being curious about myself and being in the process with like what's coming up for me and even my emotional landscape. But I think I didn't realize as much about the apps that you're saying. And I think that's really problematic. You know, I think a lot of people in community mental health that I work with really struggle with, yes, we make things accessible, but then we don't have the capacity to support the people that we've made this accessible to. So we bring a whole bunch of people in, we do a whole bunch of intakes, and then we don't have the time to sort of circle back and support these people. And that becomes heartbreaking for those that are attempting to provide that support. And so I don't know what the solution is, but I do think that we as a country need to prioritize, like, I don't know, just like what we're subsidizing a little bit more, maybe, you know, and that we need to prioritize mental health in that way somehow, because there are countries where like this is just something we support
normal
with across the board, right? And what would it look like for us to create some sort of structure around that, you know?
Yeah, I think you have to get like these big time investors and capitalism like out of the equation, whether it's, you know, Medicare for all or whatever, like insurance companies actually like, you know, giving all the benefits, all the mental health benefits, although, you know, they also have bottom lines. Like they don't have to pay therapists, and therapists aren't like good enough at like grouping together and like making a stand.
We need a union.
No joke. We do, but those insurance
Jeff, could you organize that?
We organize a union.
I thought about it. So you can start a union. It's called like an individual practice association. Doctors have it. Dentists have it. They know what they're fucking doing. They get paid a shitload of money. Therapists can do it. I've tried to do it locally in Oregon. It is a horrible, time-consuming, incredibly expensive process.
Interesting.
Like, I can't do it alone. Even like a group of 10 therapists, we would not be able to do it alone. There needs to be like people that we hire out that like get paid a bunch of money in order to create these associations so that we can have the bargaining power to go up against these like huge insurance companies that the doctors and dentists already figured out, and hospitals have figured it out, you know, but like insurance companies don't want us to do this. They know that they'd have to pay a ton more money. So they're like stopping us at every track. And like therapists are just like typically bad business people. Like we don't know how to get our shit together. So
True.
Fair enough.
So true. Yeah. I mean, anybody who's listening to, I just will say, I've heard so many frustrated, you know, I've gotten so many frustrated DMs and just emails, like the expense of therapy and how hard it is to find a therapist. And, you know, if anything, I hope this conversation helps you understand that, like, we're actually in the frustration with you. You know, I understand, like, $225, $275, $200, that's a lot of money for, you know, most people in this country for a session. And a lot of insurance companies want to pay therapists $25 for their hour. And it's not a living wage, right? And so just hear me when I say we're all in this together. And a lot of us are trying to figure out ways to make it as accessible as possible, right? While still being able to survive and like put food on the table for our families. But it's not like us against you. It really is like we're all in this together. And it's really us against them, i.e. the insurance companies and all the people who are kind of, you know, making these rules. So anyway.
Yeah. So I charge on like a very generous sliding scale, like between like $0 and $40. And the only way I'm able to do that is because I make all of my income outside of my therapy practice.
Right.
I had to be like, fine, I'm not going to make any money here in my practice, which is like, I'm happy to give like almost free therapy to all my clients. But that's only because I'm like hustling outside of it.
On the side.
That's a way to do it. And it's a ridiculous way to do it. You know what I mean?
But this is the kind of shit that therapists have to do.
It's the kind of shit that we have to do. And I just want you all to know that I'm amazing. I'm so generous. Like, do you see what I'm doing for you? I'm the best therapist there is, obviously.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Okay.
amazing.
Well,
Okay, let's do our lightning round.
Yes. All right. So the first question is, Jeff, who have been your greatest teachers, mentors, people who have impacted your journey up to this point, whether they're people you know or just their work has really been impactful?
Oh, God. Well, you know, I'm going to give credit to my mom, even though she doesn't deserve it. But she does, you know, because like if it wasn't for her, then I wouldn't have like gone into therapy. And yes, part of it was to like figure out how to like connect with her. But she did make therapy look really interesting when I was a kid growing up. I was like, this is so cool that you get to just like help people try to solve their problems. That sounds fun. There was also like one supervisor I had at the very beginning of my career when I first moved to Portland and I got my first mental health job, and I was working at this crisis line, and it was very difficult and overwhelming. And I was like trying to like create a union at this crisis. It was a for-profit crisis line, so don't come at me. And the supervisor kindly kind of like took me to the side, and she was like, hey, you're acting like a dick. You're acting like a teenager. This isn't going to work. You're amazing, but you got to drop this shit. And it was like, she said it in like a very loving way. And I like really respected her. And she went to Naropa. Do you know that college, that Naropa? So she's like basically a Zen master monk, you know, that's just like the most grounded thing in the world. And so when she said this to me, it like really hit me. And I was like, okay, I got to stop doing this. I got to stop acting like a little turd. It's not cute anymore. It was like developmentally appropriate when I was a teenager, maybe like really early 20s, but not anymore. So her name is Anne-Marie Benjamin, and she's a rock star.
I love it. That inner adolescent, man, it gets us in a lot of trouble sometimes.
It does.
It does.
I'm so curious what our kids are going to think about us as therapists.
I know. Oof.
See.
I don't know if I want to know. I don't want to think about that. So the second question is really this idea of flow, right? Like what is flow for you? What are you doing when you find yourself, you blink your eyes and like 6 hours have gone by?
That typically happens with my clients. So, and I see clients like back to back to back to back. So I'll see like 6 clients in a day, and it'll just be 6 clients in a row. And it feels like I'm binging my favorite reality show that I actually get to influence. And I like care so much about them and the characters in their life. And those sessions just go by so quickly for me. Like those 50-minute sessions feel like 15-minute sessions. And I just sort of drop in where I'm just like not really like thinking too hard or analyzing too much. I'm just sort of like in the moment. Feels like I'm kind of like channeling the information that I need to be giving them. And I go on this like whole emotional roller coaster with them where we can be like laughing or crying or having these aha moments. So it's the clients I see back to back to back to back to back on my client days. That feels so good. And I feel like I'm in the flow.
I love that. We haven't had that answer before. I love that. True therapist.
And what breaks your heart, Jeff?
What breaks my heart? Well, recently it's been, for some reason, a lot of my clients over the almost 20 years that I've been a therapist, I've like attracted, this is not a specialty of mine, but like I've attracted lots of clients that have like gone through abortions. And when I was like a baby therapist, I was doing my best to be there with them, counsel them through that. I think I did good enough. But recently, after kind of like going through my own experience with abortion and what that like emotional process was, I kind of like realized that I'm not like mad at myself for not being like a better therapist to my clients that were going through abortion. I was just like, oh, I did not understand what they went through and the heartbreak that they were feeling and the grief of going through an abortion. So like these days, just like these last few weeks, I like think back on all my clients that I'm no longer seeing anymore, that are like way in the past, where I felt like, ugh, I wish I would have had this lived experience. Obviously, there's like nothing I can do about it, but I feel like they could have gotten better counseling from somebody else. And it breaks my heart that I probably wasn't the best match for them. Maybe I was, I don't know. I know I'm like kind of being hard on myself here. But like, does that ever happen to you where you like look back on like past clients, you're just like, oh fuck, I've learned so much.
I feel that about parenting. Like now that I have a kid and you know she's 3 and I'm like in the trenches, I look back to so many of my clients, especially my female clients who had kids, little kids, what they were struggling with. And same long ago clients, people I don't see anymore, that I'm like, ooh, I would have showed up so differently if I had been a parent at that time.
Yeah. So it breaks my heart that I wasn't able to show up in that way, even though there was absolutely no way I could have shown up in that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
And I just want to throw in, I'm sure that there are ways that you're not giving yourself enough credit for the space that you held, and that just having someone present in the way that I can just tell you held space probably did so much more than you even know, you know? Yeah,
it's really sweet. I mean, it's a good reminder. I have to remind myself of that all the time.
Danae's good with the ands.
Yeah.
She's a therapist. And then our last question is, what is your favorite food?
Sloppy Joe's.
Oh, we haven't got that one yet.
Sloppy Joe's. I make really good Sloppy Joe's, and they're so sloppy, and they're so easy to make.
Like some Midwestern, like,
yeah, it is.
That's like not an LA boy thing to say.
He grew up in Santa Monica talking about Sloppy Joe's. What?
But growing up in Santa Monica, I went to Roosevelt Elementary School, and once a week we got served Sloppy
Joe days.
Lunch lady. Yeah, and I looked forward to it all the fucking time. That is my one memory from elementary school, and it is like the only thing I know how to make, and I don't care how much of a bachelor that makes me. It is delicious. Those Sloppy Joes last 3 to 4 days as well.
The image of you as a little kid, just like with your tray, uber excited for that Sloppy Joe. Just amazing.
Oh my gosh. Well, Jeff, Vanessa was not kidding. You are like pure gold. I am so grateful that I got to meet you. Thanks for coming on, and thank you for all of the content you're creating and supporting others with. I think it's really just a benefit to so many people, and I really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for inviting me on. This was really fun.
Thank you, Jeff. We really appreciate it. Where can our people find you? I mean, I feel silly even saying that because I'm sure they already know you, but put it out there anyway.
Sure. They can find me at Therapy Jeff on Instagram and TikTok. You can also find Therapy Jeff on Patreon. So that's where I put just sort of like tons of extra content. I usually have something to say about every little 60-second video I post. So I will talk for like 10 or so minutes about every video on Patreon. And you get like an even more like personal, friendly, like off the cuff kind of like Jeff in Patreon. So, or therapyjeff.com. I don't know. Google Therapy Jeff. You'll find me.
He's everywhere, even on his t-shirts.
That's right.
All right, Jeff. Thank you.